We're going to bring in Michael Savage now. He's the host of the Michael Savage podcast and the author of God, Faith and Reason. Michael, thank you so much for joining us. But first of all, Happy New Year.
Sarah, Sean, thanks for having me on this beautiful evening. And my positive message for tonight is don't hope for too much in 23. I'm not that much of an optimist, given that so many of the bad players are still around. And I know you're in New York City, and you're going to ask me a New York City question, I bet.
Not at all. Not at all. I was just going to ask you, what is wrong with the mood of the country right now?
Well, you've got a few problems out there, but I wouldn't be overly pessimistic about it. Things are not going to get much better before they get even worse.
You not pessimistic?
Well, I would say this. You know, I want to be nostalgic for a moment, if I may, Sarah. You're in New York, and there's a crime wave in New York. We've got inflation everywhere, not just in New York. I can go down the litany of problems. It's not going to make anyone feel better or worse. Everyone's waiting for the ball to drop so they can drink the wine that I've pulled out here, not just my wine, but everyone else's wine. But I want to remind people that things were bad even when I was a kid in New York. You know, it wasn't the paradise. People say, oh, it was better years ago. It was still a dangerous city. There were murders, there were rapes, there were all sorts of terrible things going on, but there were differences, Sarah. And the differences were we had mental hospitals that were functional, and people weren't running around naked on the subway cars or randomly beating up old women. There was another big difference, Sarah, and that was the police were respected. And if a cop was killed, God forbid, the whole city came to an end. It stopped. Organized crime would stop all the rackets until the perpetrator of the attack on the cop was found. So we need to restore our faith in police, and we can't have too much hope that things are going to get much better before they get much worse. I mean, look at who's running New York right now. All he cares about is partying and buying another $10,000 sport coat. I understand you had an incident where 2 cops were hospitalized tonight in New York, and the perpetrator was shot. And so things are not going to get better overnight just because we want them to, but I don't want to bum everyone out. There's one other thing to remember, if I may. There was wild, crazy people, dangerous. I was attacked with a friend of mine on a subway car going out to Coney Island when I was 15 years old. Luckily, they didn't shoot people then. And luckily, we carried big dog chains in our pockets on leashes, which we used like lassos to keep them away from us, or we wouldn't have made it to Coney Island. So things were not great in the 50s or 60s, as people would like to believe. New York's always been a crazy city. Unfortunately, the Tammany Hall gang that ran New York into the ground for 100 years, which was run out of New York, seems to be back, not only in New York, but in San Francisco, which is in the grip of a gang that won't let it go. They've raped it for all of its worth, and they have made the streets virtually uninhabitable.
Absolutely.
So that's about it. That's my positive message for New Year's Eve for tonight, Sarah. I hope I haven't made anyone cry.
You haven't made me cry, but it does seem to be a coast-to-coast issue here. And we do just have to thank the law enforcement for everything they do in times like these. Michael Savage, Happy New Year again, and thank you for joining us tonight.